Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming this session. My name is Heesung, the president of Intel Korea. Today I will lead a session with our distinguished guest. It's a great honor for me to be here and have a chance to discuss this idea with you. Today we have here to talk about social network and paradigm changing in recruiting. We have two outstanding speakers with an insightful presentation for you. And we also have two distinguished panelists to discuss about the agenda. Lastly, we will have a Q&A. And please don't hesitate. And I think we may have a written question session first and then a floor question later. But floor question might be limited because we have a full list of written questions. So be prepared yourself. Before we begin, I'd like to talk about the background of the session. Social networking has been one of the biggest cultural trends in the past 10 years. Its influence isn't limited to people's personal life, since business has been quick to use social network too. According to Social Network Recruiting Survey 2013, 94% of recruiters in the United States use social media when searching for employees. Many companies that use social networking has reported these improvement in quality and quantity of candidate and shorter hiring time. At the same time, employers are looking at a social network profile for candidate as a way to gather more information. So if you're looking for a job, and make sure you don't curse or swear on Facebook. No laugh? Taken together, social media may be creating a paradigm shift in recruiting. Fortunately, we have some excellent speakers to help us make sense of the new paradigm. Our main point today, we will discuss about understanding overall trend, how social network gives an impact to recruiting, and what the risk and reward of social recruiting, and also sharing the best practice and case of social recruiting, and also find a better way how to adapt social networking in recruiting, and also improve current recruiting system and process. And also looking for how to create a recruiting system using social network that match the company's needs. Lastly, job seekers can hail social network to deliver their value to recruiters. Without further delay, please welcome today's distinguished speakers and panelists. The first speaker is Gordon Zeilstra, the Vice President of Product Strategy, HR Line of Business at SAP. Our second speaker, Michael Karnjanaprakorn, the CEO and founder of Skillshare, an online learning company. And we also have distinguished panelists. Joon is the Senior Director and Global Recruiting Officer at SK Telecom. And Jongyeon Choi, the Chief Human Resource Officer at LS-Nikko Copper. Thank you for attending today's discussion. Okay, let's start with our first speaker, Gordon Zeilstra. Mr. Zeilstra started in the online recruiting industry as a very first international employee of Monster.com. Mr. Zeilstra held a number of roles in leadership while working in the home country in Canada and across North America, as well as in Asia and Europe. He's thought leader in the area of talent acquisition and speaker and conference globally. Currently, and for last nearly 5 years, he has been focusing on product strategy for Success Factors, and which was acquired by SAP about 2.5 years ago. Gordon is the Vice President of Product Strategy for HR Cloud Product at SAP. He's based in Singapore. He served as an advisor to startup company, and also has been advisor for the former Prime Minister of Canada on recruitment and technology. Would you give him a big hand for Mr. Zeilstra?
Great, thank you very much. Well, thank you, HS, and thank you for this panel. It's going to be an exciting session. It has been an absolute pleasure to spend the last couple of days here in Seoul, and I want to thank the organizers and certainly all of the sponsors that have put this together. It's been a highlight of the conference circuit that I get to participate in, and it speaks volumes to the organization that has gone into this and the caliber of conversation and dialogue that we've had thus far. So this is a topic that I'm extremely passionate about. I'm a social networking user. I have on this first slide a QR code. If you want to snap that and become a friend of mine on LinkedIn, I would welcome that. You'll see my Twitter handle as well throughout the course of the presentation as well. But just a quick survey. And I warn you that if you don't answer my question with raising your hand, I will make assumptions for the rest of my presentation. So first question, how many of you are on Facebook? Right. Wow. Okay. How many of you are on LinkedIn? Okay, a good number on LinkedIn. How many of you are on Twitter? And how many of you are on something else in terms of another network that I didn't mention? Okay, great. So we have a well-qualified audience here today. It looks like the vast majority of you are using social networking on some level as well. So for me, the conversation today is not, what is the paradigm shift? And I'll start with sort of the answer here right now in terms of what the paradigm shift is. It speaks to, the accessibility of candidates and the accessibility of people. It speaks to the implications that HR will have to face or is facing through this. And it also speaks to the implications of candidates. And I know that there are some candidates in the room as well. And so I think that there is a profound paradigm shift that the business will be able to partake of. And some of this could be wrought with sort of the fear of privacy. But I'm going to take a different approach, and I'm going to take this approach as this is something that should be celebrated. It should be something that is embraced from the capabilities that social networking has to play. So my second question is this. How many of you in the audience here are recruiters? That is, your day job is to recruit and look for candidates all day long. Okay, so we have a few recruiters. Great. How many of you are managers? That is, your job is not necessarily to recruit all day long, but to participate at different junctures in hiring people to your teams. Okay, so we have some managers. So I'm going to assume that all of you that didn't raise your hand are looking, and all of you that did raise your hand are actually candidates. You're looking for jobs. All right, perfect to come to a conference like this because great job opportunities and great networking can participate through this. But in all seriousness, the fact of hiring managers, recruiters, candidates, suspects, a lot of these things were talked about in a book that came out about 15 years ago. And this came out through McKinsey as well as the Harvard Business Review. And it was called The War for Talent. And the idea behind it was that there is a scarcity of resources, that we all need to develop key processes and ideas and designations in HR to help us recruit the best and brightest that exist out there. And so we created a whole lot of technology to be able to do that. And the fact of the matter is that change is incredible right now amongst HR. We're going through a crazy amount of change, and this slide might be a little bit difficult to see, but at the core of this, we're seeing about 1.7, 1.8 people that are in social networks today. We're seeing that the expenditures that are happening from companies like our sponsors are moving towards very dynamic, quickly shifting, very innovative cloud technology type of applications in terms of helping them do business. We're talking about 5 different generations that are in the workplace at the very, very same time and having to work together in the same sort of office environment or in fact virtually. And we're seeing data doubling, very, very quickly in terms of the information, the analytics, the big data that's available to us. And so the change that we're seeing has moved from the war for talent into the war for the talent network, which really speaks to the fact that I'm not just interested in one single candidate or filling one particular role. I'm actually interested in filling something with somebody and their entire network. I actually want to know who you are, but also to know who your network and the accessible talent that you bring to the organization. And so we'll talk about that. But the problem with HR is that we can throw new technology at this, and we can bring in great new paradigm shifts in terms of technology like social networking. But the fact of the matter is we've seen some ideas where just automating the same sort of functions that we've done doesn't necessarily result in great efficiencies. And so I want to take you through sort of a journey that I think will really help you change in terms of whether you're here as a candidate today or somebody who's going to be graduating from university or somebody who's got an organization and you're a hiring manager or in fact a recruiter through that. But first, it's important to understand how people recruit today. How do companies recruit today? And this happens right around the world. HR gets a memo, and it's a key person in their organization. Let's say HS, who's president of Intel, decides one day he's got a great opportunity at another organization. He calls up HR, and HR says, oh no, HS has decided to leave the organization. Panic strikes, because he's a valuable member of the team. And so what ends up happening? Well, we create what we call a requisition or a vacancy. And then as we go through this, we have to get approval, and we have to, post this off to different social networks or even some of the local, job boards that are out here. Maybe we wait for candidates to apply for this, and we wait for some time to do that. And then what ends up happening is we get a short list of candidates. We go through our interviews, we close the position off, and maybe we might find that there's actually not enough good quality that's coming through this process. So we start the process from scratch all over again. We look for more candidates. We spend more money on job boards and in fact some social networks, and then we increase our employee referrals, and we look for people who are scattered around Intel throughout our other parts of the world, and we say, hey, would you like to move to Seoul? Would you like to lead our team over there? And lo and behold, nobody comes up with that, and so we get frustrated. We pick up the phone, we call a search agency, we bang our head against the wall, and we say, okay, that's it. Time has been spent, approvals have been spent, a great degree of candidates have been exhausted through this entire process, and a lot of problems exist through it. And it actually looks like 8-year-old soccer, if you've ever seen that, right? You throw the ball in there, and the whole group of kids sort of collaborates around one particular aspect. Well, the rest of the field is wide open. The rest of the consideration is out there. And so there's a better way within this. But the fact of the matter is that, and I've picked an example here to showcase some of the things that we do to candidates. So for all of you that didn't raise your hand, all the candidates out there, this is what we do to you. And I'm picking an example of an organization that I knew purposefully was not going to be in the room, so I could pick on them a little bit. But here's an example of trying to be a pilot for Emirates Airlines. Arguably a great, great brand, one of the best brands in terms of airlines that is out there perhaps. And if I want to be a pilot, I have to come into their career site on their website, and in actual fact, and this might be hard to see, but in actual fact, I've got a situation where it might be 4 pages out of 11 to go through this application process. It actually takes me, on average, about 55 minutes or an hour to fill out this application. And one of those pages looks like this. Now, I am looking for the best and brightest pilots that are available on the market. And I put my candidates through a process that takes an hour for them to express their interest. And so, the problem that we're facing here is that the central problem in recruiting is actually not to screen out and dismiss unsuitable candidates. It's not to make your life difficult. It really isn't. So why do we create these huge, long application processes to do that? And in fact, we actually create these funnels in HR that basically says, well, if we're going through a grad recruiting type of cycle, we have to actually fill this funnel full of candidates and move them through different cycles to eventually get to the number of candidates that we want to hire. Well, so the central problem in recruiting is actually this. It's this guy. This is somebody named Brian Acton. And some of you won't know who Brian Acton is, and maybe you shouldn't, but he's a very busy guy. In fact, he ran the engineering department or one of the engineering departments at Yahoo. Very, very successful, worked there for a number of years, worked his way up through a couple of different jobs, but decided to look for a different change in opportunities. And the great thing about this is if you read on the Twitter time frame there, this is May 23rd, 2009. Got denied by Twitter HQ. That's okay, would have been a long commute. Next thing he does is he goes off to Facebook, applies for a job at Facebook. Facebook turned me down. It was a great opportunity to connect with some fantastic people looking forward to life's next adventure. That was August 3rd of 2009. Well, what was Brian's next adventure? He created a small little company called WhatsApp, and in February of this year, sold that company to Facebook for $19 billion. This is what we call in our industry the most expensive cost per hire ever. Right? So he applied for Facebook, didn't get the job, and now they had to acquire his particular business. These are the people that we want in our organization. Highly talented, highly skillful, will not apply for a job, will not spend an hour on your career site applying for a job, but in fact, any employer's recruiting priority is actually to get great people into the talent pipeline and keep them there. We want to find a time when actually our timelines line up with your timelines. If you're a great fit, be that a cultural fit, be that a skill fit, be that any sort of other sort of situation, we want to actually bring you into our organization, but not exclude you from the process. So the big question here is, what is the addressable market that we're trying to face? So I would argue here that everybody in the world, in fact, certainly everybody in this room, falls into one of these 4 categories. First of all, you are either an active job seeker. That means you are out there right now, hitting the pavement, sending off resumes, sending off CVs, hoping that somebody will hire you. The second category is maybe you're a graduate. You're graduating in a couple of months, you're graduating in a couple of years perhaps, but you are what we would call an active grad, and you're maybe not ready at this particular point, but you are ready at some sort of interval that aligns with when you're finished your studies. The third and fourth categories are fairly similar, but they're non-lookers that need to be asked, and they're non-lookers that require a relationship. This here allows for the paradigm shift of social networking in recruiting. Because if I am a recruiter in this room, I would argue that the people that need to be asked and the people that need to have a relationship are not the ones that are actually going to apply through my career site or any job board or any other open opportunity that is there. They need to have a relationship and they need to be asked. This is where social networks come in. I would actually argue that active graduates are also a great opportunity for how social networking can also happen. If you're out there today and you're an active graduate or active university, I would say that your goal is to get to a point where you have the types of relationships where you can be asked or you have the ability to be welcomed into an organization, welcome to another organization through some of the other relationships that you may have. These are the types of things that allow for great teamwork, great opportunities in your career. So let's take a look at if that is the way in which social networks can be best utilized. Let me ask this question. All of you raised your hands, or most of you raised your hands when it came to utilizing Facebook, some of you with LinkedIn, some of you with Twitter, and some of you with other networks. But the first question I would ask is, aside from social networks, how do you organize your life? How do you organize the people in your life? And I would say, I've got, people that I'm involved with sport over here. I've got people that I'm involved in business over here, people that I went to university with over here. I've got family friends. I've got, those types of people that I consider fairly closely. And I kind of keep them in different pods. And sometimes I don't mix some of the groups. I don't mix family with work. For instance, I don't bring my parents to the office or to an office party or anything like that. But there's some things that I keep a little bit separate. Well, the same thing is true with social networks. When I think about social networks, this illustration kind of helps with the discussion. But the first one is that LinkedIn for me is my professional network. I may have met you at this conference. I may have, interacted with you through somebody else that I knew. I may have worked with you. You might have been my boss. You're going to be in my LinkedIn network. With Facebook, well, these are people that I have as part of my history. I'm interested in what they have to say, but we don't really, my Facebook friends, I may not recognize you as we walk down the street anymore because it might have been 20 years ago that we met each other. And Twitter, there's a very, very good chance that I don't know who you are and you have no idea who I am. I'm just following you, I'm following your particular ideas. And this becomes, some of the issues. So if I wanted to go for a bank loan, and this sort of comic illustrates this, I've got all these friends on Facebook. Now, I can guarantee you that none of them will actually give me a loan, or very few of them would actually give me a loan if I asked for that sort of money. And this is a concept of weak ties. And the concept of weak ties speaks to this, and I can best illustrate it through LinkedIn. I've got my first-degree contacts in LinkedIn. And within those first-degree contacts, I've got really close people. I've got people who I reported to them. They were on my team. You know, I trust them. I know what their work acumen is like. I know all of these sort of things. You know, and then I've got, you know, sort of this, you know, next level of people that are outside of the highly trusted and may even go outside of the LinkedIn first degrees, and they are my highly helpful. These group of people are a few different things. The first one is these weak ties, they play a crucial role in our ability to communicate with the outside world. They have a slightly different perspective than my everyday experiences. They don't know the job that I do intimately necessarily. They may have not observed me in work before, but they can be my view into the world that I don't know. They're also, you know, the other side of it is that our very close friends will often be very little help to us in helping us find jobs. They know us too well. They may not bring us into the same sort of circles because we've got sort of those parameters out there that we keep people separate. And so if we need to get new information, these weak ties can be very, very helpful. So part of the conversation that I hope, you know, to instill here is how can we start thinking about social networks as a way to bring in our weak ties to help us if we are doing job searches, but if we are recruiters or we are hiring managers, how can we utilize that to help bring us in new candidates and great new networks of people? And so the transition there really means that to help organizations do this, instead of that funnel model, I actually want to reverse this. I want to think through social networking, the ability to actually make my hiring manager the most important person. Because inevitably, that's who the people are going to work for. And so I want to use their networks, their influence, but I also want to have other people inside our organization to act as helpers with this. And so instead of burning through a whole lot of candidates, I actually want to create networks of people where we can actually have conversations and build talent communities around this. Social networking solutions can and should be the important shift to this. The opportunity to move forward, to earn attention and trust, and curiosity and conversation. That means I'm not going to ask you for a CV the first time we have a connection. I'm going to ask to learn more. I'm going to ask to be really interested in what your company does. If I'm a recruiter, I'm going to actually intersect with you to understand what sort of skills have you brought to the table, where have your successes been. I can read your CV, but honestly, I see so many CVs per day, I see so many resumes per day, you've lost my attention if that's all you're giving me. I want to have a conversation and know a little bit more about you. And so the concept of a talent community is this. If you're an organization here today, it's really about the fact that I'm going to use all of the sources that are available to me today and the ones that may be changing. I'm going to use my career site, I'm going to use email campaigns, I'm going to use social networking solutions, I'm going to use job boards, I'm going to use search agencies and the companies that I trust to help me do some of my hiring. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to push those people to come to my career portal where I'm going to have a very dynamic, captive capability. This portal is going to have great video, it's going to have great stories, it's going to have examples of who my employees are, it's going to talk about how great of a place we are to work because we are a great place to work. It's going to utilize all of that sort of capability that allows us to be very, very social within that. And over time, my talent community is actually going to grow. And it's going to allow me to have my own proprietary LinkedIn database, if you will, of very connected people, so I can start to take pressure off of things like very expensive solutions that might be adding cost to my recruiting activity. And so social networking solutions can help build great relationships and help me recruit throughout that. So the other part of it is, and I spoke to this, about the fact that we want to create great dynamic career portals for this. And this indeed is part of social networking. So today, if I look at the average career site that exists out there, only 8% of visitors who come to that career site will start the application process. Why? Because it's not very dynamic, it's not very interesting. I don't get anything in return for this at this point. And then you'll also find that half of those people will drop off through the application process as well. And so the idea here is, how can we make career portals all about the candidate? how can we bring their attention to bear? And so I've got an example here of a client that we've worked with. This is GE. If I come to their career site, there's some great things that are happening here. Most notably, what you'll see is the call to action is join our talent community. It is not apply for a job. It is join our talent community. I can come in here and decide which area of interest I have, whether it be engineering, whether it be healthcare, whether it be IT, whether it be sales, whether it be service, any of those types of things. I can select to join that, but across this career site, everything is driven towards the candidate. I've got a map, so if you're only interested in South Korea jobs, you can click right onto the map and see only the jobs that are going to be dynamic to that location. If I'm a Facebook user or a Twitter user or a LinkedIn user, I can plug into the social networks that are available there. I've got great pictures of employees at work, within this that help me link into videos and captivating attention that is going to be there. But most importantly, when I click into any one of these fields, it's going to take me into a call to action that allows me to drop off my business card. And my business card is going to just capture minimal pieces of information. And those minimal pieces of information could come from my LinkedIn profile, or it could come from Facebook, or it could come from other ways that allow me to quickly get this information and very minimal information in there. So for instance, what's happening here is I'm saying I'm very interested in joining the talent community at GE, and I've got some passive interest right now. I'm not really urgently looking for a role, but I'd like to be interested in starting a conversation perhaps with you, but please keep me in mind when you've got engineering roles in Korea that may be of interest. So here's one way that GE is doing that. We've also got capabilities where we're actually speaking to the types of candidates that we want to make a profound impact with. So engineering candidates who are coming out of grad schools. So we've got pages and videos dedicated to this sort of activity as well. And furthermore, when I go through this step, what it will do is it'll show me the jobs that match my LinkedIn profile, but it'll also suggest to me, here's some of the people that you may know at GE. Now, what this is doing is it's picking up contacts in my network at LinkedIn, and it's picking up second-degree and third-degree connections at GE. Because what we know is great quality employees, people who stay a long time, people who perform better, want to work with other people like them. Social networking allows this particular solution to happen, where I can work with other people who A, might be familiar to me, and if they're not familiar to me, B, have sort of the same sort of paths that we've crossed. And so this creates sort of an opportunity for me to start the dialogue. In our SAP site, we've got an example of this where I can come in and join the talent network, authenticate through my LinkedIn, and then I can see the jobs that are appropriate for me, but I can also flip over and see what are the jobs that are appropriate for my social network. I work with a friend here in Korea, Eungsub, and Eungsub, I can actually take a look at his profile on LinkedIn and say, hey, Eungsub, if you are ever looking for a job, here's some opportunities at SAP that might match your particular interest. So we've got the ability for your network to basically provide that, and then this all gets tracked within this. But the point of all of this is that when we look for jobs as candidates, or if you're on the other side of things, if you're a recruiter, if you're in an HR department, no longer is one source contributing to my interest in a job. And you have to understand this, that people will start off and maybe begin their job search in Naver, and then they might come to your career site because they found you on Naver. And then they might actually go over to Twitter and see what you've been tweeting about. And then they might go over to Facebook and see what your Facebook page is about. And then they might hear about you through an employee referral program, and then they might see you at a graduate fair at your university. All of these different things contribute to the idea of what it's like to work for this organization. And social allows us to bring all of those different components within that, and also, more importantly, track how candidates are coming to us so we can ensure that we're creating great campaigns to get other people like you through this. And so the strategy becomes this. It becomes, we want to create great portals. Then we want to be able to create great social networking capabilities that exist on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on YouTube, on any other sort of social networking solution that might be able to appeal to our audience. But we want to take a look at opportunities that help us evolve into that. We also want to be able to measure everything that we do. How long are people spending on social networking sites? Are people reading through our information? Are they clicking on these particular videos? Are these particular videos enhancing our employer brand as an organization? So all of those different things contribute to us. But it also allows us to change the dialogue. If I spoke to most HR departments around the world, especially within recruiting, they are looking for answers to the questions that I have X'd out over here. What is your time to fill? What is your cost per hire? What is your quality of hire? What is your source of hire? What is the applicant satisfaction? These are not helpful answers. They don't help change my business. We want to ask better questions, which is, where are our best employees coming from? What's the DNA? Are they coming from these particular schools? If we had this idea that the best candidates for our engineering program came from these top 3 universities in Korea, don't you think we'd like to emulate that particular strategy a little bit more? I've got one client in India who basically looks at it in terms of, I actually don't want anybody from the first 3, the top 3 universities, because they are so overly communicated to that I want to actually go after another tier of universities and another tier of programs, and they've found that their most successful candidates are coming from schools that look like this. But we're empowering people with the type of decisions based upon the analytics that are coming through this. So a couple final thoughts as I turn it over to Michael, and Michael's got a great perspective too, as somebody who's doing this actively as a CEO, looking at social networking as part of it. But social networking, can be part of it can be a tactical way of looking at how I'm going to look at Facebook, how I'm going to look at Twitter, how I'm going to look at YouTube, and it can formulate part of the strategy that allows us to say, you know what, we're not just going to be in the business of collecting CVs and doing nothing with them. We're going to start actually as an organization building relationships with our ideal top talent wherever they may sit. The other part of this is being creative. So career portals and social networking, I mean, it's kind of like, you are, if this was TV, you'd have billions of different channels. It's very, very noisy. So you have to be able to be creative. To copy what GE is doing up there is not the answer. To be able to take your own sort of story and publicize that, and to be able to be very creative with that, will allow you to have, great dynamic capabilities. And that speaks to you as candidates as well. Create a very dynamic presence about who you are. That may be something, if you're in engineering on GitHub, it might mean that you're doing some interesting things in terms of a portfolio, that you can speak to the actual progress that you've made or the things that you've done as part of your portfolio. Use simplicity, repetition, and volume. Again, if this was, the internet is kind of like the storefront that has billions of people walking by every day. How do you create a simple message that is captivating, that actually appeals to the right sort of people as well? So we want to be able to create something that speaks to our intended audience as well. Be creative, be captivating, be clear. There's also a be careful. So can employers access some of the privacy things that are out there? Well, I know in most jurisdictions around the world, privacy is a conversation that is being dealt with if it already hasn't been dealt with some sort of legislation. But I would tell you that these are things where you want to be extremely careful with the type of content that you're making available on your social networks. And without getting into too much detail on that, I think that taking extreme caution in what you're looking at and who you're looking at and the type of information that you want to extend to employers is also going to be very, very important. So the war for talent has changed. It's the war for the talent network. And with that, I want to turn it over to Michael, and certainly look forward to your questions at the end of the session.
Thank you, Gordon. I can't agree more with you. As Gordon pointed out, social networking is proliferating and having a huge impact on every aspect of human life. HR division in many industries are changing their hiring system. Mr. Gordon proposed in his presentation that we should proactively approach these trends in order to benefit from the new system and the structure. It sounds a little bit lyrical, and his presentation has a valuable point to think about how we could transition our current system into more advanced system that find hires and more relevant candidate and provide right people and right person in right time. Thank you again, Mr. Gordon. And okay, let's move to our next speaker. Michael. Michael is a CEO and founder of Skillshare, an online learning platform where users can master their real-world skill. If you're looking for learn about a photography or fashion design or even organizing your workflow, this is the place for you to find. And this company was founded in 2011 and has quickly grown and being a center fast-growing startup. And Michael will surely be right inside on how the relationship between social networking and recruiting. And I just found out Michael was Michael's mother is Korean. You never see him as a Korean look like, but his father was a Thailand. So Thailand, Korean really bring these young talent into our second guest speaker. Michael?
Thank you. So today I actually had a lot of my presentation geared towards HR and companies, but it seems like a lot of the people in the audience are actually more on the other side, around candidates. So riding off the last presentation, I think what I'll do today is kind of dive deep into what you guys should be looking for when you go out, or finding your first job, or moving on from your current career to your next. So I'll go through a couple trends. I have 3 key points I'll make. I'll also end with some career advice as well. So I got this career advice about 10 years ago. It really helped me throughout my career, so I'll share that at the end as well. So the biggest thing I think I've learned over the years is that there's a big shift that's happening, and I think it's probably happening for the first time in the history of the world, which is, predominantly companies always had the power to select who they wanted to work at their company. And the reason is because there's a limited amount of roles, and there's just tons of people trying to apply for those roles. So a lot of what Gordon referred to around the recruiting process was very similar to looking at a lot of resumes and kind of fitting people into very specific roles and then hiring them. I think what's happening is that the world is moving towards this entirely new conceptual age, which is more creative, more collaborative, really centered around innovation, really centered around thinking outside the box. And it's a whole new set of skills that didn't really exist before. So I think what's happening is there's lots of companies valuing these new skills, but there are very few people that could fill those roles. So the shift has shifted to the power back to all the candidates. And that's what I've been seeing, working at Skillshare, working at the tech and the startup community. So I'll share lots of examples over the next 20 minutes that kind of mimic this trend. And I think what's happening in the world is that there's 2 things that companies like Skillshare and Google and Facebook and leading innovative companies really value, and I think it really breaks down to something really simple, which is how you think and what you've done. And those are 2 key principles that we utilize and we talk a lot about internally at Skillshare, and how we want to build our company, how we want to build our culture, how we want to build our team, moving throughout the next couple of years as well. So my role at Skillshare is the CEO. So I'm in charge of setting strategy, fundraising, but I also look at myself as a CCO as well, which is the Chief Culture Officer. So culture is something that we take very, very seriously, and it's basically based on my personal experience working at a lot of different companies. So even leading up to Skillshare, I never felt like I worked at a company that really put me at the center of it, that really took my needs and what I was looking for, what I wanted to learn into account. So we've kind of designed and architected a very unique culture at Skillshare, which I'll go over in a second. But this is really based on one trend, based on this author named Daniel Pink, who wrote a whole book on this whole new world around the conceptual age. And he said that people that are moving into this age, they value 3 really key things, and that's all that matters to them. And when I read this, I was like, wow, this really resonated with me, because these were the 3 things I was looking for throughout my entire career. Number 1 was just autonomy. When they join a company, they want the freedom to make decisions. They want the freedom to take risks. They want the freedom to be heard. which doesn't really happen in a lot of companies because of the way it's set up and the hierarchy that you've seen in those. The second thing that a lot of this new talent is looking for is what he calls a sense of purpose. So it's very important for when these people join a company, it's not about making this new device, it's about connecting the entire world and having a sense of purpose in what you're doing. So having a company that, where the whole purpose is around just profiting and make as much money as possible doesn't appeal to this new generation, which I definitely think is true as well. So he talks about autonomy, he talks about purpose, and the third thing, which I think is the most important, is what he calls mastery, which I would translate to just learning. So people want to join companies because they want to join a culture where they're constantly just learning as much as possible, so they're continuously advancing and moving their career forward and also helping the company in the same time as well. And one of my favorite examples of this is, as the world's moving towards this new conceptual age, or we could call it the creative economy, there's a school that got created in Stanford called the D School. So this was actually created by the founders of IDEO, which is one of the world's leading innovation design firms. And what they proposed to Stanford was creating what they called the design school to really teach this notion of design thinking, which is really set up to educate this whole new group of talented people to teach them how to think and teaching them how to do things. So the whole principle around design thinking is the school is set up where it's not appealing to designers. It's engineers, people from the medical school, people from the law school, the Stanford B School. It's a school that's open to everyone. And what they do is they put all these different people with different backgrounds, different experiences into a learning environment where it's completely project-based, where they utilize these principles around design thinking. And one of my favorite stories that came out of the Stanford D School is from a doctor who was trying to figure out a way to find a solution to a lot of his patients who are young kids who are scared to go into that, I guess, the MRI scan, where they have to lie down and go in. And he was noticing that he couldn't really do his job because a lot of these students, or a lot of these patients he had would never just go in because they're just scared of the machine. So he applied what he learned at the Stanford D School, and he designed this entirely new experience. And he had, each room had a different theme. There was like a jungle room, there was like a Disneyland room, and he just had these different rooms that made it very comfortable for these kids to go through and take these scans. And I think it went from I don't have the stats off the top of my head, but it went from a very few amount of his patients to many of them, which he was diagnosed a lot of different problems that these patients had, and allowed him to prescribe a lot of ways for them to be cured and to be healed. I use this example not to talk about medicine, but to showcase that as the world's moving into this new conceptual age, or the creative economy, it's really about how you think and what you've done. And from him graduating from the Stanford D School, he was able to apply that to his field of medicine. And I think the world is going to value and has already valued this type of thinking, which historically wasn't valued before. So you can imagine if he went to a job interview and they asked him, what was the most amazing thing you've done, and where's your biggest accomplishment? And you can imagine if he used this as an example, how that will allow him to stick out and differentiate himself from all the other doctors that could be applying for the same job. And I think you could use this example for pretty much anything, whether it's medicine or law or tech or education or government or policy. This type of thinking is going to be valued in moving forward. Because these new, this new type of thinking, these new skills around creativity, collaboration, curiosity, critical thinking, communication, pretty much a lot of companies have re-architected how they operate. And this is just another example how the power is shifting from companies to talent. So one of my favorite examples is Google. I'm pretty sure of you guys, I don't know if you guys have seen that movie, The Internship, which really highlights how Google's culture operates, how they're very, very different, how fun it is. But as you can see just from this design, as somebody that's looking for a job, how would you not want to be working at a place like this? versus a very corporate place that's very hierarchical, where you're not really allowed to learn or master or have any sense of purpose. One of my favorite things about Google, which is a massive company, humongous, is that they really, really embody the principle of keeping everything extremely flat and having what they call a culture of meritocracy, where the best ideas rise to the top. So at Google, they have everything set up into smaller teams. It's a completely open plan. Everybody from the first hire all the way to the most senior person are allowed to work on things and pitch ideas and work on them and eventually innovate as well. So companies like Google have architected their culture from the get-go. They've also have great perks, which I'm pretty sure a lot of you know of as well. They'll do your laundry for you. They have shuttles. They have free food. They have pretty much everything that they could do to attract this talent to come work there, as well as architecting their culture to reflect that as well. The third key point I definitely want to make is, as the world's moving into valuing these new skills within the creative economy, the entire hiring and recruiting process has completely gotten revamped as well. So one of my favorite examples is the school in New York called Flatiron. This was actually one of our first Skillshare teachers who taught a Ruby on Rails class, which is a programming language. And he became so successful that he ended up starting his own school in New York. And essentially what it is, and what the program is, it's a 3-month program where you can come in with absolutely zero coding experience, and they'll teach you how to code after those 3 months. So it operates like a very normal school. They have school hours. It's project-based. They're always coding. But what's interesting about the Flatiron School is what happens when you're done with the program. And when you're done with the program, if anyone listed Flatiron School on resume, I don't think anyone in this room or even in the world would even know what that was. It's not the same as listing Harvard on your resume or Stanford. So what they've done at Flatiron School is, when these students graduate, they create a portfolio on GitHub, which shows all the things that they've built. All the websites they've built, all the APIs they built on top of, all the apps. And essentially, so when these candidates are applying for jobs, they're submitting their GitHub resume so that the VP of engineering or the CTO of these companies could really go look at the code that these people have written. So it's less about where they went to school or their experience, but it's more about what they've done. And I think that's a very interesting trend that's happening. That's something we definitely believe in at Skillshare as well. And the last story I'd like to share with you is kind of lifting the hood on how we've designed and architected our culture at Skillshare, based on these principles that the world is moving to this creative age. Entire cultures and companies have been re-architected to appeal to this new talent, and re-architecting even hiring and recruiting as well. So at Skillshare, one of the first thing we ever did at Skillshare is we set our culture. And our culture really started with a couple very key principles and beliefs, as well as some very key processes that we put in place as well. So one of the first beliefs we've ever had at Skillshare is that we value talent more than someone's experience. So we look at someone's potential, we look at how they think, and we looked at what they've done, and those are the things that we value more than where they went to school. So actually, when someone applies to Skillshare, where they went to school is actually one of the last things we look at. We try to look at all the things they've done, and it could be as simple as creating a Kickstarter project, which shows lots of initiative, which shows that they could have created something out of nothing. For those of you that don't know what Kickstarter is, it's a website where you could put any idea on there and ask the world to fund it with money for that idea to happen. And this website has funded over $1 billion worth of ideas. The second thing that we believe in at Skillshare is that team is more important than any single individual. Because we believe that if you get a bunch of people together in a room, they have a sense of purpose, they work very well together, that these group of people will achieve something more great than any single individual. So we've been known at Skillshare to reject really great people just because they didn't fit, within our culture or they weren't a team player. The third thing that we architected from day one is that our culture matters just as much as the company. And we wanted to create an environment that attracted the best people, that really took in those 3 key principles in mind, which is around giving a sense of purpose, allowing them to master and learn, and giving them autonomy to make as many decisions as possible. So we designed our culture to be very top-down and very bottom-up as well. And we even adopted the example of Google, where there are lots of small teams. We have lots of ideas that bubble to the top because we do value creativity, we value innovation, we value great ideas. We value people that just go out and just make their ideas happen. So with this in mind, I'll walk through kind of our interview process to show how different it is, just to show you what happens when the power gets shifted from companies to talent. So one of the first things we did, throughout the interview process is, we had a very hard time distinguishing who would be a good cultural fit. And in the early days, it was really around a simple question: could you go out and, grab a beer with this person? And that was kind of the question we would ask each other if, people are cultural fit for Skillshare. And after a couple months, what we realized is everyone always said yes. Yeah, I would grab a beer with this person. This person's awesome. He or she is really fun, and I love working with them. And we realized that wasn't a really effective question. So what we did instead is we created what we called our core values. And our core values are things that we value as a company that we want everyone else to value. And if they exhibit these core values, they would be a great cultural fit, regardless of how old they are, regardless of their background, regardless of their experience. If they fit these core values, we feel like they would be a great cultural fit that work well within our team, that allow us to achieve something that we never could have achieved before. So we narrowed down our core values to 4 very simple principles. The first one being around humility, and the idea that we have a saying that we don't want to work with assholes. We want to work with people extremely humble, because humility leads to great teams, and that's something that we value a lot as well. The second core value that we value is adaptability. So the most constant thing that will ever happen at a small startup like Skillshare is that it's always going to change. And we need people on our team that can adapt to that change and roll with the punches. The third core value that we value is resourcefulness. And I personally think this is the most important for Skillshare. And it's the idea that no matter what happens, no matter what challenge gets thrown your way, you will find a way and plow through that challenge and just figure out a solution to make it work. Which is why we value those skills around creativity and communication and collaboration. And the last one is a very simple one, which is just passion for excellence, which is the idea that you will always do great work. You will never sacrifice or cut the corners or go around find shortcuts. And so for us, we created a really simple acronym, which is HARP. And from this acronym, what we've decided to do is we set tons of interview questions to test people on whether they're a cultural fit at Skillshare or not. So a great example of great interview question for resourcefulness is, can you give me a time when you were about to quit on something and you didn't give up and you found a way to overcome that challenge? As you can see, we don't ask people where you went to school. We don't ask them things along those lines. We ask some very, very specific questions to see if they're a cultural fit. And as soon as they go through that interview process, we flip it and we just start selling them heavily on joining our company. Because what usually happens is when we find people that are cultural fit, they're extremely talented, what we end up saying is in the top 1% because of the way they think and the things they've done. Realize this is such a rare person to find that we automatically go into just selling that person and joining our company. And if you guys had to take a guess on what we sell them on, it's essentially those 3 things that Daniel Pink mentioned in this book. So we talk a lot about learning, and we talk a lot about all the programs we set in place. We talk about autonomy, that you can join our company and make lots of decisions. So you could go join a big company, which is also great, but if you join a small company like Skillshare with a very, very singular mission, you're going to be able to make really big decisions and make a lot of mistakes, but also be extremely successful. that'll help you learn what to do and what not to do for your career. And then the third thing we talk a lot about is just our purpose, our mission. This is actually the biggest thing that we talk about throughout the entire interview process as we start recruiting people to join our team and our company, which is, our mission and our purpose is to provide access to education to everyone on the planet. And if you went to Skillshare today and you asked any single person there that question, every single one would have that answer. So throughout the years, as we started architecting our culture, I think what we've started to notice is that it's very rare to find people that think differently and can also do things. And going back to the earlier theme of what I mentioned earlier, it's because the power is shifting from companies to talent, this is a great opportunity for everyone in this room to go out there and interview the company as much as they interview you, but also make sure it's a fit for you as well as it is for them, which leads to the career advice that I got about 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, I was volunteering in New Orleans, and I was thinking about moving to New York. And I had 2 job offers at the time. So I had one job offer from this company called Behance. It was a very small startup. It was 4 people, and they were working out of their living room. And the pay was not so great, but it wasn't that bad either. And another job offer for an advertising company in New York, that was about double the pay. And I had a really hard time trying to figure out what to do, because getting paid double when you're very young is a lot of money, especially considering New York is really expensive. So I was going through a couple days, and I was going through like a lot of agony trying to figure out what to do with this humongous decision for my career. And I got on the phone with Scott Belsky, who is the CEO of Behance, and he essentially just asked me one really simple question, which is, where do you want to be in 5 years? And if you have some idea of where you want to be in 5 years, you should make every decision that puts you one step closer to getting there. My answer to him was, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to start my own company. I wanted to learn. I wanted to be in a culture where I could make decisions. I wanted to be in a place that had a sense of mission and a sense of purpose. And after we got off the phone, he essentially said to me, it sounds like you already know what your decision is, and about an hour later I accepted the job at Behance. Mostly because it was a great environment, it was another startup, and I felt like I could learn as much as possible there. But what it helped me distinguish is to not make my decisions based on money, but make my decisions based on where I want to go throughout my life and my career, and making a decision that put me one step closer to that as well. The reason I share this story is because the world is definitely shifting to talent. And essentially what Scott was doing to me on the phone was selling me on joining his company. And I think as many of you go out into the workforce and establish what you want to do with your lives, or if you want to switch careers, I think the most important thing for you guys is to make the decision based on where you want to be within your career, and not make any decisions on where you don't want to be. That said, I'm done.
Thank you, Michael. Wow. So Michael really giving us a very insightful information about how these young venture or startups are really looking at the talent. And also he also give us how you guys, the job seekers, really, you are the one who really making a decision. Not only the company who try to hire you, you have to prepare yourself. Whether you fit in that company culture, or you really like those venture culture like autonomy or sense of purpose or mastery. If you really fit in that, you may get there. But if somebody may like a more structured company, so it really depends. But Michael really show us as a young entrepreneurship who really see what he really achieved in the future. That's the reason why he making his early decision to hiring in the very only half pay small company. So thank you, Michael, again. So this is around time to go into panel discussion. So we have Gordon give us a more conventional companies, a evolutional approach for using social network for recruiting. and Michael giving us a very radical approach of the hiring in even his company's Skillshares, how they really hire people. And let's ask Joon as SK Telecom's HR director, what he thought about these presentation.
I need to work out, but before I get started with sharing my idea, I have to tell you the two things. The first one, I'm really my honor to be here with a great audience and respectable speakers. Second thing is that it's not our company's stance, it's just my personal stance. And using social media for recruitment, I'm a little bit skeptical about it. I want to share why I'm thinking it's a little bit skeptical about in using the social media. First of all, I like to say that social media itself is not a magic at all. Even though it brings you different perspective, new perspective of the recruitment, differently from using a traditional way. But before you begin the social media in earnest, you must consider the followings. What will be your target audience? Where they are. I mean, which social media they spend more time on. And the contents. Which contents you're going to put up on which social media? How you create the content to attract people. How you want to deliver to them. There are many considerations that you must take before you're going on social. And you should be prepared with all studies and investigation as precisely as possible to come up with a social recruitment strategy. I don't encourage you to just follow the trend. The following trend will not give you a significant result all the time. You will end up just saving, wasting your time and cost. More seriously, you will even hurt your company reputation as well. Another important aspect is engagement. What's engagement? Once you find a good candidate after your approach on social media, you must provoke a question about your company and the employee experience. And you answer to them, listen to them, have a two-way conversation, exchanging idea insight. In this process, you will have good chance of understanding your candidate. Finally, it helps you evaluate if they are a real fit for your organization. Can the engagement being made on social media? Partially, yes. But you shouldn't spend your time so much on it. Minimize your stay on the social media. Go offline to see your favorite candidate in person. If necessary, don't hesitate to use even the traditional way. This is an engagement I like to emphasize today. Namely, to hire better and quality people, you should be able to utilize even a traditional way, as well as social media. The social media delights you with some sweet taste in that it helps you to save time you cost. You like it. You'll get addicted to it gradually. Then in the morning of a day, you'll find yourself confined with a force of habit that you cannot fully depend on the social media for recruitment. Whichever phase your talent are in. To make it short, you should be able to identify you begin to move your time from staying on social media to offline engagement. Why? It's because the social media is not a perfect solution all the time to make sure you hire better and right people. I'd like to remind you of 3 takeaways from my comments today. 1, there are many considerations before you going on social media, not just to follow the popularity. 2, you have to develop the compelling content like storytelling to attract people. 3, you must know when you start deep dive engagement with your favorite candidate, online engagement is still good, but it's not good enough fully evaluating your candidate. Thank you.
Thank you, Joon. So we are listening from SK Telecom's HR manager that he is really skeptical on fully depending on social networking. He's asking us to do more balancing between online and offline. So let's go to our next panelist, Jongyeon Choi, a LS-Nikko copper.
저는 여기 이제 참석하면서 이게 다시 이제 이 소셜 미디어라는 이 수단에 대해서 좀 다시 생각하게 된 부분이 있는 것 같습니다. 그래서 저희가 이제 페이스북이나 이런 부분들을 그 채용에서 일부 사용하고는 있었지만 본질적으로 이제 이런 흐름의 변화, SNS가 주는 사회적인 변화들이 채용 환경에 어떻게 영향을 줄 것인가에 대해서는 깊이 생각을 하지는 못했던 것 같습니다. 근데 이제 SK텔레콤과 달리 저희 회사는 예전에 이제 LG금속이었어요. 그래서 LG금속 때는 사람들을 하이어링하는 게 상당히 용이했습니다. LG라는 브랜드가 있어서. 근데 이제 LS로 저희가 분리가 돼서 지금 그 저희 회사 이제 잠깐 소개를 드리면 그러니까 국내에서 전선이나 이제 통신선에 쓰고 있는 동을 주로 생산하고 있고 동을 만들다 보면은 그 금은들이 좀 나옵니다. 그래서 저희가 약 40톤에서 60톤 정도 금을 생산해서 은행에 가보시면 골드와를 저희가 만든 거예요. 그래서 여러분들 보시면 그 확인하실 수 있을 겁니다. 근데 저희 회사가 이제 78년이 됐습니다. 근데 변화가 굉장히 적은 비즈니스고 이 동이라는 거는 예전에 청동기 시대부터 썼던 그 재료거든요. 근데 그 재료들의 변화들이 지금도 그렇게 많지는 않습니다. 근데 그 최근에 이제 한국 기업들 보게 되면 상당히 어려움을 겪고 있다고 생각이 드는데 그 부분이 저는 이제 상당히 구조적인 문제가 있다고 생각을 합니다. 산업 구조적인 문제들. 그래서 산업에 대한 그 혁신이나 새로운 산업을 일구지 못한 부분들에서 이제 어떤 챌린지가 오는 게 아닌가라는 생각을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 저희 관점에서도 그래서 그런 측면에서 새로운 사업, 뭐 저희 리사이클링이라고 해서 자원을 순환하는 그런 사업이나 아니면 이제 칠레 쪽이나 저쪽 멕시코에 가서 저희가 이제 광산 사업이나 이런 새로운 그리고 이제 R&D를 통해서 새로운 소재를 개발하는 이런 쪽으로 사업을 넓혀가고 있습니다. 근데 이 사업들을 하다 보니까 대부분의 그 경우에 그 스킬들이 한국에 없는 경우들이 상당히 많더라는 거예요. 그래서 칠레 뭐 광산 전문가를 찾으려고 그러면 저쪽 칠레나 캐나다에 가야 되고 아니면 리사이클링 전문가를 찾으려면 유럽 쪽에 가야 되고 근데 한국에서 소재 관련된 사업을 전개하려고 했더니 관련된 사람이 한두 명밖에 없는 거예요. 근데 이제 저희가 링크드인에서 이제 서비스나 이런 부분들을 토대로 해서 그 사람을 퀵하게 찾아봤더니 글로벌하게는 150명의 엔지니어들이 그 아주 좁은 분야인데도 존재하고 있더라는 것입니다. 그래서 이 지금 이 고든 그 부사장님이나 아니 마이클이 지금 얘기하신 전체적인 것들을 보게 되면 그 소셜 미디어가 주는 어떤 이점에 대한 부분을 분명히 얘기를 하셨다고 생각이 들거든요. 그래서 이게 소싱에 대한 부분들, 인재 소싱을 굉장히 용이하게 할 수 있는 부분들, 그리고 브랜딩을 강화할 수 있는 부분들, 그런 이제 여러 가지 측면, 그리고 기업 문화 측면까지 이제 복합적인 얘기를 해주셨는데 실제로 저희가 이제 최고의 브랜드가 아니기 때문에 이 페이스북을 통해 가지고 사람들하고 커뮤니티를 만들고 하는 그 과정들 자체가 저의 브랜드를 높이는데 상당히 도움이 되더라는 겁니다. 그러니까 저희가 사업적으로는 한국에서 경쟁이 없지만 사람을 채용할 때 되면은 조금 더 나아지긴 했지만 최근의 경쟁자는 삼성전자거든요. 저희 신입 직원들 뽑아놓으면 제일 많이 뺏어간 데가 삼성전자예요. 그러니까 실제로는 저희가 인재의 경쟁은 완전히 다르다고 저희는 생각이 들거든요. 그 관점에서 봤을 때 저희는 더 브랜드를 채용의 브랜드를 높일 수밖에 없고 더 긴밀하게 그 캔디데이트들하고 소통할 수밖에 없는 구조를 가지고 있다고 생각이 듭니다. 근데 대부분의 SK텔레콤이나 이제 삼성전자 아니면 다 비슷한 이슈들이 이 인사 담당자들이 있으시다고 생각이 들어요. 그런 측면에서 우리가 브랜드를 높이는데 분명히 도움이 되는데 그 굉장히 제한적인 활동을 해왔구나라는 반성이 하나가 있고요. 또 하나는 아까처럼 그런 소스, 글로벌하게 우리가 비즈니스를 넘어서 사람들을 찾을 때 과연 전통적인 채널, 그러니까 헤드헌팅, 아무리 이제 글로벌한 펌을 쓰더라도 정말 그런 사람들을 퀵하게 찾아내서 컨택할 수 있느냐라는 측면에서 봤을 때 상당히 이 부분이 용이하지 않을까 하는 생각이 듭니다. 그래서 그런 측면에서 저는 좀 다르게 좀 보고 싶은 거는 소셜 미디어의 흐름은 분명히 가는 것이고 그 가는 흐름들이 정말 저희와 같이 이제 채용 브랜드가 떨어지는 회사에는 상당히 좋은 도구가 될 수 있겠다라는 고민들을 좀 해봤습니다. 그래서 그런 측면에서 안 그래도 저희가 홍보의 대부분이 저희가 B2B 회사이기 때문에 사실 사람을 타겟으로 한다고 저희는 보여지거든요. 그래서 그 사람 측면에서 이 페이스북이나 링크드인이나 이런 그 소셜 미디어 기반 그리고 인터넷 온라인 채널의 중요성은 분명히 높아지고 있다고 보여지고 그런 측면에서 좀 저희가 지금 두 분의 그런 메시지들을 좀 잘 받아서 하게 되면 그 좀 유용하지 않을까 하는 생각입니다.
감사드립니다, 최상무님. Sorry, I speak. So, Mr. Tse summarized that as a different aspect, as a company who are in brick and mortars, more B2B oriented company, but they are using this social recruiting platform is the best platform to hiring these multinational. When the company try to really making a global reach, that's the best place to getting a pool of resource to hire in the future. I think. Thank you so much for your all contribution. So we only have about 19 minutes. So I have some of questions I have already, but I'd rather using your question from the floor and the written question. The first question is a Inoject Choi Jin-hyuk. He questioned to Michael. Korean student has been trained or has been learned not making his own decision for his future. Inoject has want to changing this culture totally. But Korean students are scared to changing these changes. What is your recommendation for these students who are scared to change?
Very good question. I think there's a lot of companies in the US that are very, very similar as well, where they don't want anything to change. There's a hierarchy, it's very top down, it's whatever your bosses say you should do, you just go out and do it. So in that world, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think if you're looking for something different, I think one of my key points is there has to be, and there are, and there always will be companies that have adopted that mindset, even here in Korea as well. Tonight I'm going to speak at another event where there's lots of startups there that probably value this type of thinking, this type of environment. There are a lot of other global companies that are here as well, like Google, that also value that. So the short answer is you should go interview and find companies that value that and find a good fit for yourself, whatever that is for you.
Thank you. So it is more like a flow. First flow question is a more student or some very young student. Second question for making a balance, go to Joon, SK Telecom. How are you successfully recruit through SNS? How much percent? Especially very high spec careers. You need
successfully hire the people, but the using social media is depending on what should be your target audience, as I said earlier, and then also in using social media you have to consider what phase of recruiting funnel your candidates are in. But so in that sense that even though we don't have that kind of statistical data, how much we hire the people through the social media. But I would say that we have we are differentiating the level of engagement on the social media, depending on where you are in and the way your candidates are in. All right. Before they have awareness about your company, we spend more time on social media. And also, if someone has some desire to working in my company, then we spend less time on social media than we are going to some offline engagement directly.
Thank you. Next question goes to Golden. I'm working as a part-timer. I hired through SNS. Did you ever regret after you hire through these people through SNS? Social networking hiring. Any failure after that?
Well, I think so when I think the important thing in the context of social networking solutions as part of hiring, and whether it's the experience that SK has or Nikko is we're really looking at this as part of a larger strategy. So I would argue that social networking solutions isn't a be-all and end-all for most companies, and likely won't get there for a long period of time. But I would say, simplistically, it's your way today and the highway. In other words, the information highway, the social networking solutions. So I think that there's a combination of factors that can contribute to this. I would say that from a social networking solution, that I want my candidates to be as informed as possible about our organization. I also want to take the responsibility as a leader in my company to ensure that the messaging that we are putting out on social networking matches the reality of what the job and the culture is going to have as well. So, I take Joon's comments with full agreement on that there has to be a lot of thought. There has to be a lot of consideration in that. But I think we do greatly reduce our chances of having poor hires if we do a very good job of providing a lot of information and using social networking solutions to help tell our complete story, and not just rely on job postings that might be out there or job descriptions that can keep a fairly flat information piece about what it is like to work at that organization.
Thank you. Next question come up from, there's many people from Innoject today. I got another. So this question goes to all, but I want to go to Mr. Choi first. What type of talents are best or right talent? How do you distinguish those? Do you have a specific guideline to distinguish those talents? And this person also sent thanks to Michael, who've been speaking it very specifically.
대부분 그 인재를 보는 눈들이 회사가 비슷하다는 생각이 들거든요. 저희가 이제 아까 제가 말씀드린 것처럼 저희 채용을 해놓고 뺏긴 직원들을 보게 되면 주로 삼성전자에 많이 뺏겼다고 했지 않았습니까? 그러니까 저희가 인재를 보는 시각이나 그 삼성전자 보는 시각이 상당히 유사하다고 보여집니다. 근데 저희도 이제 규모가 있는 회사니까 사람을 볼 때 가장 중요시 여기는 부분들은 결국 직무에 대한 부분들도 있지만 회사의 문화, 마이클이 얘기한 것처럼 회사의 가치에 얼마나 부합되고 또 앞으로 저희가 가져가는 그 전략에 맞아 들어가느냐. 저희가 뭐 단일 사업을 하고 굉장히 작은 비즈니스, 그러니까 하나의 비즈니스를 계속 영위한다고 했을 때는 거기에 맞는 사람들이 필요할 것이고 지금처럼 전략을 굉장히 공격적으로 하고 그럴 때는 거기에 맞는 또 다른 인재들이 필요하다고 보여집니다. 그래서 결국 회사의 인재상도 회사의 전략과 연계돼서 얼마나 강하게 이제 연계돼서 사람들을 채용할 수 있느냐라는 부분들이고 지금의 상황에서는 굉장히 적극적인 도전적인 인재들 그러면서도 팀워크를 유지할 수 있는 인재들 이런 인재들 두 가지 축이 가장 중요하다고 보여집니다.
Joon?
You're looking at people we hire, people we decide to hire some people. The first one, we are trying to look at cultural fit to see if they are real fit for our organization in culturally and in the way of skill set. And the second one is the experience and background that the candidate have. It must be aligned with our business strategy. We are going the business in that way, then a talent we're looking for, they must have the kind of skill set alignment with our strategy.
Thank you. I think there is many high school students also joined this session. I picked 2 questions from high school students. One is a Anyang Foreign Language School, Kim Gun-mo, and 청심 국제고등학교, Jongyeon. So, first question is both of 2 speakers, Gordon and Michael. I don't know exactly whether you know or not, but in Korea, there are few chances for high school students to take time to have experience and earn creativity. So please give some advice to students in Korea. Gordon, you first.
Well, so I think that the advice that I would give on that is, and you know, I've had the opportunity yesterday to hear Dr. Hando Puller, who is president of University of Waterloo. University of Waterloo is in my hometown in Canada, and there was quite a remarkable story that he talked about, and actually I saw firsthand in Waterloo, Canada, where graduates of that particular school have been so successful because they've thought and put programs in place for co-op education. I think that you know one of the things that was very, very important to me even back in high school was to look for practical application for some of the things that were particularly interesting to me. I had a particular interest in politics that continued on through university, actually helped me get into university. And so I got involved in student politics. That opened up an amazing network of people that inevitably allowed me to get my very first job out of university. So the relationships that I was making as a 15, 16-year-old were really contributing to a real helpful aspect in terms of getting me my very first role at Monster.com. And there's a longer story to that, but I do think that, you know, one of the things that employers, especially today, and it was talked about through Michael in terms of being resourceful and being agile and being able to, you know, being able to adjust to change, is employers are looking for well-rounded, you know, total packages with hires of organizations that are startups, for instance. And that's the area that I had entered in as well. And part of that is saying, you know, there's an importance that we're going to place on our academic studies and an importance that we're definitely going to drive through on that. But we're also going to look for opportunities to participate in the arts and in environmental activities and in social conscience sort of things, and perhaps in politics or in volunteerism as well, that really help us build a stronger picture. And so those are the types of things that I would say to somebody that's in high school that's looking for opportunities to really shape and really consider what they may want to do when they finish university, if they go to university, and inevitably get into the career of their choice.
Thank you, Gordon. So Michael, for you, the second question. So because shake of time, so you better be answering the second question. This Chongsim High School student. Covering your yesterday's lecture, this student already been in yesterday's lecture. You differentiate the concept of learning from education, but formal education be the basic to develop one's creativity effectively. What do you think?
I would agree as well. I think based on what Gordon was just saying, I mean, starting over, I think I had the answer to the last question. So to quote the keynote speaker from yesterday, I would definitely say just don't play video games. Stop playing League of Legends. But all jokes aside, I think whether you look at your formal education as a great way to get or not get, your the sense of creativity, or whether you don't have time because you're going through school right now, based on the last question, I think you should always just look at all of those throughout your life as just challenges that you'll have to overcome. And I think what the keynote speaker talked about yesterday around grit and dedication and essentially just hard work is is a skill and a trait that's very important for you guys to develop throughout your lives. So whether it's, I don't have a formal education, I can't learn creativity, or 50 years from now or 15 years from now, it's, I'm running this multi-million-dollar unit within Samsung and I don't know how to overcome this challenge. It's all the same thing, and the most important thing is to overcome all those challenges, look at all those as opportunities to learn, and exemplify what the keynote speaker talked about yesterday, which is just grit. Because there are always going to be challenges, there are always going to be excuses, but I think the only thing that matters is overcoming those.
Thank you, Michael. So far, I've been delivering most of the questions from floor, but if it is not enough, I may have one person from the floor who raise your hand, and please raise your hand. Okay. The lady in the center, yeah, giving her a mic. We have only 4 minutes, 18 seconds, so you better quicken your question.
저 지금 이노젝트에서 아까 질문한 이혜수인데요. 모든 연사분들께 질문을 했었거든요. 근데 지금 허준 분과 최종현 분께 질문을 드렸었는데 회사의 문화랑 가치에 맞는 사람들을 채용을 하셨다고 제가 들었어요. 근데 회사의 문화랑 가치에 맞는 사람들을 채용을 하셨는데 적합한 인재들이 다른 회사로 유출되는 이유가 무엇이라고 생각하시는지 저는 궁금했습니다.
Okay. Joon, you first.
Sometimes it's very difficult to see, to judge that some people are real fit for our corporate culture. All right, in that sense that it takes a long time. It could take a long time to figure out if this guy is a real fit for our organization or not. Well, we try our best, evaluate them, well, assess them to see a real fit for our organization. Now we try all the time to minimize the mistake we make for the people. But in cultural, the culture in company is not that different from your daily life. Okay, the cultural thing is not a special thing. So cultural means that we must be disciplined, sincere for the job, and any responsibility for the others. It's the very common values is like a culture. I don't think every culture in the company is very similar, but different expression. So in daily life, you are doing as a good people, like the devotion and sincerity and responsibility to others, you'll be okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
네, 짧게 답변드리면 결국 만족하지 못하기 때문에 떠나는 거 아니겠습니까? 근데 만족하지 못하는 가장 큰 원인을 보게 되면 뭐 금전적인 부분도 중요하지만 첫 번째 중요한 건 회사가 기회를 적절하게 주느냐가 제일 중요한 것 같습니다. 그래서 회사 전체적인 성장이 있고 기회가 있다 그러면 일단 전체적인 리텐션이 잘 되는 것 같고요. 그 중에서도 개인에 대해서 특별하게 더 배려를 해가지고 기회를 줄 수 있는 그런 환경들이 있느냐라는 것들이 가장 중요한 것 같습니다. 그리고 세 번째로는 관계의 질이 상당히 중요한 것 같다라고 생각이 듭니다. 저희 회사 같은 경우에 이직률은 상당히 낮은 편이거든요. 근데 조직 문화, 특히 사람하고의 팀워크나 관계를 유지하기 위한 여러 가지 활동들을 저희가 굉장히 구조적으로 지원을 하고 있거든요. 그래서 그런 측면들이 복합적으로 지원이 돼야지만 사람이 리텐션 된다고 보여집니다. 그 중에 첫 번째는 회사가 과연 기회를 줄 수 있느냐, 이게 가장 큰 부분이라고 생각이 듭니다.
Thank you. It's time to wrap up. So far, we talked about the way we can incorporate the social network into our recruiting method. We have touched 2 points. First, recruiting method, recruiting candidate quicker, and second, getting more relevant candidate. Instead of avoiding these changes, we must use our insight from the speakers to adapt our HR practice to modern era. And one other point was as Michael said, young job seekers. looking for the company who are best fit for yourself also. Not only these companies looking for you as a best fit for their company. So both of these needs should be met. That's the best place you work for. Thank you for all to joining here. Also giving all these nice presenters and speakers and discussants, giving a big round of applause. Thank you.